On a bustling Friday night in downtown Los Angeles, a man quietly stepped through the doors of Torque's restaurant. He wasn't wearing a suit, had no bodyguards, no camera flashes or fans shouting his name. Just a man in a dark hoodie, worn jeans, and faded sneakers. But it was none other than Vin Diesel, Hollywood action star and the quiet owner of Torque's, a high-end yet welcoming restaurant he had poured his heart into building. Torque's wasn't a vanity project or a way to burn excess money. It was a true passion. Vin had spent years studying each dish, hand-picking chefs, and crafting an environment where every guest, from blue-collar workers to celebrities, felt valued and respected. But Vin understood something many forget. Numbers on a spreadsheet don't tell the whole story of a business. Profits might rise, the menu might be flawless, and customers might be pleased, but if behind the kitchen there are sighs of exhaustion, if in the break room there are tears, then that's not success. That's why he had a habit. Every few months he'd visit Torque's himself as a regular diner. No announcements. No one knew he was coming, and it was in those moments that the truth usually revealed itself. That night, the restaurant was packed. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation, the aroma of garlic butter, grilled beef, and pepper sauce weaving through the space. Servers moved like dancers, balancing steaming plates and colorful cocktails. From the outside, Torque's was a flawless symphony. But Vin, with his seasoned eye, sensed something was off. His gaze stopped at the manager, a tall man with a rigid posture, wearing a dark blue shirt and standing at the edge of the dining room. His stare wasn't one of oversight and support, but of control, of scrutiny, like a predator watching prey. Vin's brow furrowed slightly. His instincts were rarely wrong. As he approached the bar, a faint sound cut through the surrounding noise. Crying, soft, stifled. The kind of crying that comes when someone is barely holding it together under pressure too heavy to speak aloud. At first he wasn't sure, but as he passed the hallway leading to the kitchen, the sobs became clearer. He paused, glancing toward the break room, the door slightly ajar. Inside, a young woman in a Torque's uniform had her head bowed, gripping the edge of a stainless steel table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Beside her stood a male employee in the same uniform, speaking urgently, worry etched across his face. Neither noticed Vin, quietly witnessing everything from outside. He didn't know the girl, but he recognized the look in her eyes. It wasn't just fatigue from a long shift. It was fear, pain, something far more serious. Vin returned to the bar and sat down calmly, though his mind was spinning with questions. What was happening behind the scenes at his restaurant? Who was making an employee cry in silence? And most importantly, what would Vin do next? Can you guess what's really happening at Torque's? What would you do in his shoes? Leave a comment and stay tuned to see how this story unfolds, where compassion confronts hidden power. Vin Diesel's first instinct was to walk over and ask the girl if she was okay, but he held back. Because right now he wasn't Vin Diesel, the owner of Torque's. He was just another anonymous diner at a crowded bar. So he sat quietly, observing and listening. The voice of the young man, who had just been in the break room with the girl, still floated out softly, just audible to those paying close attention. You can't let him do this, he doesn't own you. His words were firm, yet filled with worry. The girl responded, her voice shaky, as thin as a thread about to snap. What choice do I have? He made it clear. If I don't do what he says, I'll lose my job. Vin tightened his grip on the glass of water the bartender had just placed before him, a silent welcome gesture. This wasn't about a rude customer or a drunken patron. The fear in her voice pointed to something internal, someone with power, someone familiar with this place. Just then, a bartender approached. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you anything?" Vin offered a polite smile, still composed. Just water for now. He didn't need a drink. He needed answers. His eyes returned to the manager in the dark blue shirt. The man still standing like a statue, arms crossed, scanning the room like a hawk tracking prey. Something was very wrong beneath the polished surface of Torque's. Then Vin noticed the young man, the one from the break room, had returned to the floor. His face was tense, jaw clenched, fingers fiddling with the order pad in his apron pocket. Every movement screamed, "Something's not right." That's when Vin knew it was time to act. He stood, walked quietly to the prep station at the back of the restaurant, where the young man was arranging plates. "Hey," Vin said, keeping his voice low so no one else would hear. "Can I borrow your pen?" The young man looked up, slightly startled. "Oh, yeah, of course." He grabbed a pen from the counter and handed it to Vin. But Vin didn't walk away. He glanced at the name tag, Tyler. "Tyler," Vin said, his voice calm and even. "I couldn't help but notice your friend doesn't seem okay." Tyler stiffened, gripping the stack of plates tighter. "She's fine," he replied so quickly it sounded rehearsed, unnatural. Vin tilted his head slightly. "Doesn't look like she's fine." Tyler swallowed hard, his eyes darting quickly toward the manager, then dropped his gaze to the floor. Jim recognized that reaction all too well, the response of someone restrained, caught in the struggle between speaking up and staying silent. After a pause, Tyler let out a breath. "She's not okay." Vin studied Tyler's face, watching the way his jaw tightened, the way he clutched the notepad in his apron like a lifeline. He could tell Tyler wanted to speak, but didn't know if he could. "Is this something with a customer?" Vin asked, his voice dropping even lower, like tossing a lifeline into the sea of silence. Tyler hesitated. That hesitation alone told Vin everything. "No, it wasn't." "No," Tyler finally said softly, as if only half able to voice the truth. His eyes flicked toward the front of the restaurant where the manager still stood, arms crossed, face unreadable, eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Tyler exhaled hard again, then glanced down the hallway toward the break room. Tyler shook his head, trying to muster a deflection. It's her personal business. But Vin knew that wasn't true. Not because Tyler was lying, but because he was afraid. Vin had seen it before in this industry. Employees trapped in toxic environments not because they didn't want out, but because they couldn't leave. Financial pressure, personal obligations, or worse, fear. Vin leaned casually against the counter, keeping his demeanor relaxed, as if the conversation was no big deal. "Has she been working here long?" Tyler replied instinctively, "Over a year." But the moment he said it, his jaw clenched again. "Why do you ask?" Vin shrugged, "Just curious if she actually likes working here." Tyler let out a dry, joyless laugh. "She doesn't, but she can't afford to quit." And that was it. That was the heart of the matter. She wasn't just tired, she was trapped. No way out, no choice. Vin felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just a bad workplace. This was a trap. Something deeper, darker, was holding these young people captive in this restaurant. But before Vin could ask anything else, Tyler's body tensed like a pulled wire. Vin didn't need to turn around to know what had changed. The atmosphere in the room had thickened, weighted by an unwelcome presence. The manager, the one in the dark blue shirt, was walking toward them. "What's going on here?" His voice was smooth but sharp, like a blade honed too finely. Tyler immediately dropped his gaze, fumbling with the plates in front of him. "Nothing, sir. Just helping a customer." Only then did Vin slowly turn around. Standing in front of him was a man in his 40s, crisp shirt, slick back hair, and a chiseled face hardened by years of seeing too much and caring too little. This wasn't just a strict boss. This was someone who understood his power and relished it. The name tag on his chest clearly read Rick Calloway. "Can I help you?" Calloway asked, his politeness wrapped around a dangerous kind of scrutiny. Vin smiled, his tone light. "I just needed to borrow a pen. Tyler was kind enough to lend me one." Calloway didn't take his eyes off Vin. "Good." He patted Tyler on the shoulder, a gesture meant to seem friendly but carried an uncomfortable weight. "Focus on your work." Tyler nodded quickly, eyes still fixed on the stack of plates. "Yes, sir." Vin clenched his jaw but kept his expression calm. He nodded at Tyler and walked away, acutely aware of Calloway's eyes tracking his every step. But now he was certain he wasn't leaving this place, not while the truth remained hidden. He stepped outside, letting the cool night air soothe the simmering anger in his chest. From the outside, he looked like he was just checking his phone, but in reality his mind was racing. Something didn't add up. Emily was clearly too afraid to speak. Tyler was cagey, like someone holding on to a life-altering secret. And Rick Calloway, he was the kind of man who lived to dominate, to control. Vin had met his share of bad managers, but this was different. This was calculated tyranny. If he wanted the truth, he needed someone unafraid to talk. And then, as if the universe was listening, a side door of the restaurant opened. Nate, the bartender from earlier, stepped out, leaning against the wall, casually scrolling through his phone, looking like he was grabbing a quick break. Nate leaned against the side of the restaurant, eyes on his phone, seemingly stealing a moment of rest between rushes. Vin saw his chance. He approached, hands in his pockets like a friend passing by. "Long night shift, huh?" Vin said casually. Nate looked up, a little startled, then relaxed when he recognized him. "Yeah, Fridays are always a madhouse." Vin nodded, leaning against the wall beside him. "Mind if I ask you something?" Nate hesitated briefly, then shrugged. "Sure." Vin kept his tone casual. "Your manager? Rick Calloway? What's he like?" For a split second, Nate's expression changed. It darkened. Just a flicker, but Vin caught it. "He's strict," Nate replied carefully, choosing his words. "Always wants things done his way." Vin tilted his head. "That's pretty normal, right? Most managers are like that." Nate sighed, then glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Not that kind of strict, he's—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. Then, in a breath-like whisper, Nate said something that sent a chill down Vin's spine. "Hers often keeps Emily late, alone." Vin's muscles tensed. "Just her." Nate nodded, his eyes full of unease. "Yeah, and he talks to her like she owes him something. I've seen it. Every time he calls her into the office, you can see it on her face. She gets really tense. It's not normal." Vin crossed his arms, squeezing his own biceps to stay calm. He had seen this type before. Manipulative managers who used their authority to control, preying on the vulnerable, making them believe they had no choice but to submit. "Has she ever said anything about it?" Vin asked. Nate shook his head. "No, but she didn't have to. We all see it." Vin exhaled slowly. There was no doubt anymore. This wasn't just a toxic workplace. This was a systematic predator. "Thank you for telling me, Nate," Vin said, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're a good guy." Nate offered a weak smile, though worry still clouded his eyes. Vin turned back, looking toward the restaurant. Emily was still inside, still under Calloway's control. And now Vin knew exactly what he had to do. He couldn't wait any longer. He'd seen situations like this before in Hollywood. Places where those in power bent the rules, manipulating those with less to get what they wanted. He knew too well what it felt like to be trapped in an environment where every move was monitored, where saying no meant risking everything. Vin pushed open the glass door and stepped back inside the restaurant. The atmosphere had settled. Dinner service was winding down, the crowd thinning, fewer witnesses. But Calloway was still there, near the staff area, his eyes sweeping the room like radar. Vin walked slowly, but with unwavering purpose. He didn't stop at the bar. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward Emily. She was speaking to a customer, her voice steady, her face composed, but her eyes were vacant. When she saw Vin approaching, her shoulders flinched, a reflex born from too much time spent on the defensive. "Excuse me, I need a moment of your time." Emily looked up, startled. I'm helping a guest right now, sir." The customer frowned, clearly annoyed. "She's assisting me. Could you wait?" But Vin didn't take his eyes off Emily, and his voice remained firm. "This is important." Emily glanced at the customer, then bowed her head slightly. She sighed, apologized, and stepped away from the counter, putting a few feet between them. Vin could feel the tension thickening around her. She didn't say it aloud, but it was obvious she was carrying something heavy. Immediately, Calloway noticed. He straightened up, his eyes narrowing. He didn't like losing control. Emily led Vin a few steps away, her hands trembling slightly, gripping the edge of her apron like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "How can I help you?" she asked softly, but her voice was strained with tension. Vin took a deep breath. "I know what's going on," he said, his voice low. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know you're not alone." Emily froze, trembling slightly, then quickly regained her composure. But the smile she forced onto her face was fragile, strained. "I don't know what you mean," she replied, avoiding Vin's gaze. Vin didn't back down. "Calloway, the late shifts, the way he treats you, I know that's not normal." Emily's fingers clenched into fists, but she said nothing, remaining silent. And that's when Vin realized her fear wasn't just about the job. It was the fear of standing up to someone who wasn't easy to confront. "I can't," she whispered. "You can," Vin cut in, his voice firm, undeniable. "And you will, because I promise you, he's not untouchable." Before Emily could respond, a figure stepped between them. Rick Calloway, eyes sharp and cold, approached with a look of clear disapproval. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was low but loaded with authority. Vin could hear the threat laced within it. Vin didn't turn to face Calloway right away. Instead, he kept his eyes on Emily. He saw her body tense, shoulders draw in at the sound of Calloway's voice. Her hands gripped the edge of her apron again, an unmistakable sign of fear. In that instant, Vin understood everything. He turned around, face still calm. "We were just talking." Calloway smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Emily has work to do. She doesn't have time for personal conversations." Vin immediately caught the tension in the way Calloway emphasized personal. That was the signal he'd been waiting for. Both men knew exactly what was being implied. That was when Vin shifted his stance, grounded, unshakable, commanding the space. "Actually," Vin said, his voice steady, "I think it's time we had a real conversation." Calloway inhaled, his smile fading as his expression shifted for a brief second, but Vin gave him no chance to respond. Casually, he pulled a wallet from his pocket and flipped it open, revealing his ownership credentials for the Tours restaurant group. Emily let out a soft gasp. Staff nearby froze, their eyes beginning to fill with surprise. The entire restaurant seemed to pause, the air thick with tension. Calloway couldn't hide the panic in his face, and for the first time, that face lacked confidence. "My name is Vin Diesel," Vin said, still calm but with an authority that could not be denied. "And we need to talk." The entire restaurant fell silent. Customers were peeking over their shoulders. Staff exchanged wide-eyed glances. Calloway stood frozen, mouth opening and closing, suddenly looking like a cornered animal. "Sir, I didn't..." "No, you didn't understand," Calloway stammered. "That's exactly the problem," Vin interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. Then, turning to Emily, his tone shifted, firm yet gentle, a steady warmth in the middle of a storm. "You're safe now." Emily stared at him, as if still trying to process what was happening. Her lips parted, a shaky breath escaping. Then, for the first time that evening, she stood a little taller. Not by much, but enough for Finn to see. The fire inside her was coming back. Calloway's unease was now unmistakable. "Sir, I assure you this is all just a misunderstanding," he said, trying to cling to the last shred of control. "If you'd give me a moment to explain in my office." Vin cut him off, his voice as sharp as steel against stone, leaving no room for argument. "Now." Calloway swallowed hard, his confidence shattering. He turned and walked stiffly, like a man being marched to his fate. Vin followed, but before entering the office, he paused and turned to Emily. "Wait here, this won't take long." Emily nodded slightly, her hands still trembling at her sides. When the office door shut, the air seemed to freeze. Inside, Calloway tried to regain composure. He forced a smile, shaking his head. "Sir, I wasn't expecting you tonight. It's unusual for an owner to show up unannounced." Vin leaned forward, placing both hands firmly on the desk, his eyes piercing. "You know what's more unusual?" he said, his voice low, every word deliberate. "A restaurant manager abusing his position to intimidate his staff." Calloway froze. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb," Vin snapped. "I know everything. I know about the late shifts. I know how you treat Emily. I know you think you can get away with it." Calloway turned pale. "I assure you, I've always conducted myself professionally." "That's enough," Vin's voice cut like a blade. He pulled out his phone and tapped to play a recording. In the silence of the office, Emily's trembling voice rang out clearly. "If I don't do what he says, I'll lose my job." Then came Tyler's voice. "You can't let him do this. He doesn't own you." Each word sliced through Calloway's false professionalism. His face turned ashen. "You should have known better," Vin said, his voice now icy. "You've been playing this game too long, preying on people who need their jobs, making them believe they have no choice. But I'm here to tell you your time is up." Calloway stammered. "Please, I can explain." "No, you can't," Vin interrupted. He dialed a number on his phone, straight to the executive HR department. "It's done," he said. "You will never work in this industry again." Calloway collapsed into his chair, hands shaking like a man who had just fallen into a bottomless pit. For the first time, power had left him, and he knew it. Vin turned and walked out of the office, but he wasn't finished yet. When he returned to the main dining area, the atmosphere had thickened with tension. Everyone was waiting, Emily, Tyler, Neat, and the rest of the staff. They all looked at Vin as if waiting for a verdict from a judge. The entire team stood in silence, holding their breath. All eyes were on Vin, the man who had just done what no one else dared. Vin took a deep breath, then looked straight at Emily. "He's gone," he said quietly, his voice low but unwavering. "You're safe now." Emily's lips parted, and a shaky breath escaped like a chain had just been broken. Then, for the first time that night, her shoulders relaxed. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing a year's worth of weight. Nate stood nearby, stunned. Other staff exchanged glances, their eyes wide with disbelief. Was this really happening? But Vin knew it wasn't over yet. He turned to address the entire team. "You've all been working under someone who never deserved that position," he said, his voice clear and firm. "That ends today." Emily wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice trembling. "So what happens next?" Vin looked at her and offered a gentle smile. "You tell me, what happens next?" A simple sentence, but to Emily it was like a key unlocking a door that had been sealed for over a year. For the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. Agency. She looked to Tyler, still stunned, then to Nate, who nodded subtly as if to say, "Go ahead, we've got your back." Everyone was waiting for her. Emily took a deep breath. I don't want anyone else to go through what I did," she said, her voice shaking, but honest. "Not here, not anywhere." Vin nodded, his expression resolute. "And they won't." He turned to the entire staff. "From now on, this restaurant will be under direct oversight. We're not just replacing Callaway, we're overhauling everything to make sure no one else can abuse their power here again." The room remained silent, but this time it was a silence filled with attention. His words weren't promises, they were commitments. Tyler suddenly spoke up. "Sir, I don't mean to overstep, but this isn't just about Callaway." Vin raised an eyebrow, his voice deepening slightly. "Go ahead." Tyler hesitated, then stepped forward. "The way things operate here, it's not just one bad manager. It's the pressure, the way we're treated, the fear of speaking up. It's bigger than just this restaurant." Nate nodded in agreement. "A lot of us feel like we don't have a choice. Complain once, and you're out." Emily looked down, her face shadowed with quiet guilt. "I wanted to quit so many times," she admitted. "But I couldn't afford to. And I kept thinking, maybe this is just how it is." Vin clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. This was why he did what he did. Not for numbers, not for performance reviews, but for the real things, the hidden problems buried beneath the polished surface. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room. "Ends today. But I don't just want to fix this restaurant," Vin said, his voice steady and sincere. "I want to change the whole system, and I need your help to do that." He looked around at everyone, his gaze unwavering. "That means transparency, that means trust, that means if something's wrong, you have to speak up." Emily still looked hesitant. "And if we do, will someone actually listen?" Vin looked her straight in the eye. "I will." She stared at him for a long moment, as if reading every nuance of his words, every flicker in his expression. Then, finally, she nodded. And for the first time that night, her face showed true trust. No more doubt, no more fear. An hour later, Vin sat in his car, silently watching through the window. The staff were cleaning up, locking the restaurant after a long night. He didn't call out, didn't wave, just watched quietly. Emily stepped outside with Tyler and Nate. The three of them chatted lightly, walking slowly into the night. They looked like people who had just been freed, people who had carried a weight on their shoulders for far too long and were finally beginning to breathe again. Vin exhaled, running a hand over his face, half exhaustion, half contemplation. This was just one restaurant, one manager, one location. But how many more places like this were out there? How many employees like Emily were silently enduring, too afraid to speak? How many times had Vin read a report, looked over a spreadsheet, and thought things were fine, while beneath the surface an entire system was rotting? Being a leader isn't about chasing profit or efficiency. It's about people, it's about trust, it's about standing up when everyone else stays silent. And tonight Vin was reminded why he started this journey in the first place. Not for fame, not for wealth, but for truth. Too many people in power have looked the other way, treating employees like numbers, like financial figures. But real leadership isn't control, it's accountability. If you ever find yourself trapped in a situation where someone is abusing their power, don't stay silent. Speak up. And if you see someone else suffering, don't look away. Sometimes all it takes to break a toxic cycle is one person brave enough to act. If this story touched something in you, don't forget to hit subscribe, to join us in uncovering more honest, inspiring, and meaningful stories like this one. Every subscription is a reason for us to keep spreading truth and hope.